Welcome to today's webinar, entitled Geoheritage, Protecting Western Australia's Rock Stars. My name is Sarah Martin. I'm a paleontologist working for the Geological Survey of Western Australia, and I will be your guide today through this exploration of the concept of geoheritage. So let's start with some word associations. What do you think of when you hear the word heritage? For most people, it conjures up ideas of museums, buildings, and cultural artifacts. And what about conservation? Perhaps that evokes thoughts on endangered species, breeding programs, and rainforests. So the question is, how do rocks fit into that equation? It's true that heritage, conservation, and diversity are words that we rarely associate with rocks and landforms. However, landforms, soils, and geology not only have intrinsic scientific and aesthetic value, but they are important influences on the biota that evolves and the culture, history, and artifacts that develop within a region. For that reason, geology, biota, and culture are three interacting aspects of heritage, and all should be valued equally by the community. The goal of this webinar is to provide some background on one of these ideas, geoheritage, and explain how it is identified and managed within the state of Western Australia. In that way, we can all do our part to support heritage in all of its forms. So first, a definition. What is geoheritage? There are a number of technical definitions in use, but in essence, geoheritage is about identifying, managing, and preserving exceptional or representative geological features. In reality, the term geoheritage is often used as shorthand for three separate but closely related ideas: geodiversity, geoheritage, and geoconservation. Geodiversity is a quality of the natural environment, essentially a measurement of the variation of geological forms and processes seen in an area. Geoheritage, on the other hand, is a set of examples of that geodiversity that have been identified as having conservation significance. And geoconservation is the endeavour of trying to conserve geodiversity using that representative set. To keep things relatively simple, in this talk we are going to use the term geoheritage to represent all three of these ideas working together. Although rocks might be seen to be invulnerable, this is not the case. A dramatic example of the vulnerability of landscapes is the 12 Apostles in Western Victoria, which saw one of the 9 stacks collapse in 2005, with one of the nearby 3 sisters also collapsing in 2009. Although we can't prevent damage to sites by natural influences such as wind and water, a number of landforms are particularly vulnerable to human influence, such as construction, agriculture, mining, and pests, and we can prevent undue damage from those effects. Essentially, the goal of geoheritage is not to stop all possible damage to sites, but to limit any damage to natural causes at natural rates of change. Work on identifying sites of geological heritage within the state began in the late 1970s, initiated by the Western Australian Division of the Geological Society of Australia, a professional organisation representing geoscientists. The GSA commissioned 2 reports, one published in 1979 covering the Perth area and southwest, and a second report published in 1984 covering the remainder of the state. Identification of sites in these reports was mostly made through discussion with local geoscientists. The sites in these 2 reports form the basis of the State Geoheritage Register, work on which was begun by GSWA in about 1989. However, changing priorities for the survey meant that the register was not officially formalised until about 2003. During work to formalise the State Geoheritage Register, it was recognised that a small number of sites on the list needed better protections than could be provided by the register at that time, and work commenced on creating specific geoheritage reserves under the State Land Administration Act for these localities. A number of these geoheritage reserves were already state reserves of one form or another, and were simply transferred to the management of the Minister for Mines and Petroleum, whereas other reserves needed to be created from scratch. The present set of geoheritage reserves were finalised in 2009, with a management plan published in 2010. As a result, GSWA's management of geoheritage sites and reserves has been in operation in its present state for over 10 years. In parallel to state recognition of geoheritage, There have been various mechanisms to recognise heritage at a federal or international level. Initially, national heritage recognition was via the Register of the National Estate, a listing that included many state geoheritage sites. This listing became defunct in 2003, replaced by the Australian National Heritage List, which is more restrictively defined and therefore has far fewer sites listed. Of the 17 West Australian sites presently on the National Heritage List, 5 include localities of geological significance. Also critical to the recognition of heritage is the World Heritage List, of which there are 20 sites across Australia and 4 in Western Australia. Of these 4 West Australian World Heritage Sites, 3 contain localities or landforms of geological significance. This highlights the international value of West Australian geology and indicates the importance of protecting our unique landscapes. GSWA is the ideal agency to manage geoheritage for Western Australia, as we are the state's lead agency for geoscientific data. GSWA has been active for over 130 years, and during that time we've accumulated a massive data set on WA's geology and geomorphology. Presently a division of the Department of Mines, Industry Regulation and Safety, we include a large group of geoscientists with expertise across the state and in a wide variety of geoscientific disciplines. GSWA has an Australian and international reputation for high-quality geoscientific research, working in collaboration with many research organisations worldwide. We publish a wide range of books, pamphlets and datasets on various topics of state geology and directed at a variety of audiences, much of which is free to access and use. Much of GSWA has a research focus rather than regulation, which permits some degree of independence from mining regulatory processes while still being able to advise other parts of the department assessing proposals which might negatively influence geoheritage sites. In order to identify localities within the state worthy protection, GSWA uses the following definition for sites of state geoheritage significance, otherwise known as geoheritage sites. To qualify as a geoheritage site, a location needs to have geological features considered to be unique or of outstanding value within Western Australia, and to have significant scientific and educational values for the good of the community. In reality, this covers a number of different scenarios. A site or landform could be unique or aesthetically spectacular. These are also known as monuments. A site or landform could provide an important insight into Western Australian geological history and evolution. These are mainly research sites. A site or landform could be an excellent representation of a critical geological process. These are mainly educational sites. Or a site or landform could have historical significance in state geology, or could be strongly linked to a person of historical significance to geology in Western Australia. These are partially scientific and partially cultural sites. In Western Australia, the main way we manage geoheritage sites is through the use of the State Geoheritage Register. Once a site is on the register and mapped, we are able to monitor any influences on the site and intervene where necessary. In the register, there are 2 types of localities, with controls that relate to the level of site importance and vulnerability. The most critical and valuable locations are registered as geoheritage reserves. These are Crown C-class reserves vested under the Minister for Mines and Petroleum under the management of the Executive Director of the Geological Survey of Western Australia. These sites are strictly controlled, having a formal management plan. Most reserves cannot be entered without prior permission from GSWA. There is an access application form available through our website. As these sites are considered the most valuable and vulnerable of geoheritage localities, none are open to fossicking, prospecting or mineral exploration. Access can be permitted for scientific purposes, but any proposed sampling must receive separate permission. We consider that most of our current geoheritage reserves are not suitable for tourism due to their vulnerability. Having locations converted to geoheritage reserves is a long and arduous process, and as a result, only the most critical sites are ever considered for this level of protection. The remainder of localities on the State Geoheritage Register are geoheritage sites. Sites are added to the register for reference without any changes made to their underlying land tenure properties. There is no formal management plan for geoheritage sites, and access is entirely dependent on the tenure of the underlying land. Some of the geoheritage sites are within pre-existing state reserves, such as water, timber, or biotic conservation reserves. In those cases, day-to-day management of those locations is managed by other state government departments, and access is dependent on the site's individual management plan. Some localities fall onto other types of Crown land, pastoral land, or on private freehold land. In those cases, access is per normal requirements and avenues. Written permission from the owner or leaseholder is required to access private land or pastoral leases, with permission to be obtained prior to entering the property. Despite the lack of formal control for geoheritage sites, it should be remembered that all sites added to the register are important to the state, and people should refrain from damaging or driving over outcrops, camping within the sites, or collecting geological materials, in order to maintain the long-term viability of these locations. Currently, the State Geoheritage Register contains 8 geoheritage reserves and 136 geoheritage sites, representing rocks of all ages and distributed all across the state. Of the 8 state geoheritage reserves, marked on this map with red stars, 6 are early life sites located in the Pilbara, 4 of which are key Paleoarchean stromatolite sites and 2 preserving Paleoarchean microfossil sites. The remaining 2 reserves are proven impact craters, that is, craters where meteorite fragments have been collected and therefore the cause of the crater is well understood. As a reminder, under the State Museum Act, all meteorite fragments found within the state of Western Australia belong to the state and must be handed in to the WA Museum if found. The remaining 136 geoheritage sites, marked on the map with green stars, represent a broad range of geological localities. Some are important fossil localities, some contain rare rock types or minerals, some are outcrops or localities critical to understanding the geological evolution of Western Australia, some are beautiful and iconic landforms, and some are proven potential or probable impact craters. However, we consider that our present listing of 144 significant localities is a very low number for a state as large and geologically complex as Western Australia. We are currently reviewing all the sites on the register and aim to expand the number and range of sites on the list in the near future, so that the register is more representative of the total diversity of rock, soil and landscape types in the state. Revisiting all of the presently listed sites gives us the opportunity to gain more detailed and up-to-date information on each site's condition and features. In addition, we plan to image every site using GSWA's drone, which will allow us to produce 3D models of the localities. These models will be useful for management purposes and will also help us expand the range of educational materials available. It's a work in progress, so watch this space. Here is a selection of some of the fabulous geoheritage sites already listed on the State Geoheritage Register. Some of these sites, like Wolf Creek Crater, the Pinnacles and Murchison Gorge, should already be familiar to those who live in Western Australia. Other places like Canalna Dam and Black Point might not be as well known, but are no less significant and worthy of protection. Now let's look in more detail at some of the geoheritage processes in place. Presently, there is no single legislation that regulates geoheritage and geoconservation, and no piece of current state legislation specifically mentions geoheritage. However, the protection of landforms is implicit in a few acts, and there are a number of different pieces of legislation that can be used to help support and protect geoheritage sites in various ways. A small number of sites on the State Geoheritage Register have an aspect of cultural heritage, and those sites can be managed under the Western Australian Heritage Act. As mentioned previously, geoheritage reserves are created and managed under the Land Administration Act. Site access and works requests for mineral exploration, prospecting and fossicking that might affect geoheritage sites are generally managed using the Mining Act. Similar assessments are also possible under the Environmental Protection Act for other industries undertaking works. And finally, sites that fall within Crown timber, nature or other conservation reserves are managed under the Conservation and Land Management Act. Overall, GSWA undertakes a number of roles in managing geoheritage within the state. The first role is to accept, propose and assess any nominations for sites to be added to the register. The nomination process is currently being finalised but will be open to everyone. A GSWA record will be released once the process is official to guide people through nomination, and a digital form will be added to the DMERS website for nominators to use. As mentioned previously, we are presently reviewing all sites on the register to ensure that they are still considered significant, and on completion of this process we will undertake an assessment of the state to identify additional sites which have not previously been included on the register. We are working on a robust process using both internal and external experts for assessment, and are committed to ensuring that all relevant stakeholders are informed of applications and remain up to date during assessments so that all concerns can be considered and addressed in a timely manner. Second, GSWA can establish new geoheritage reserves whenever sites are considered to be particularly vulnerable and additional protections are required. This is done in association with other state government departments due to the complexity of reserve creation. The third role we undertake is to assess access or sampling requests. These consist primarily of applications received to enter and/or sample within geoheritage reserves. We also provide input and advice to other parts of the department who are assessing programs of works, mining proposals, and mining tenement applications, and other departments who are assessing land use proposals. In these cases, we are alerted to the proposal if it intersects a mapped geoheritage site or reserve. We also provide advice to federal departments assessing sites for addition to either national or international heritage lists. The final role is to promote geoheritage, produce relevant educational materials, and to communicate with relevant stakeholders. As localities are reassessed and new sites nominated, we aim to gather as much data as possible on each locality and to produce appropriate educational and informational materials. The form of these educational products is as yet unknown, but might be produced on a regional basis or according to the types of landforms. As mentioned previously, we will be using the GSWA drone to create 3D models of each of the sites, so a range of products including digital datasets and virtual tours are likely to be produced. We also provide advice and information to local, state and federal government departments, organisations, businesses and the general public on geoheritage sites, their importance, scientific information relating to the localities, their access and condition. This can help groups assess any potential issues or damage that might affect sites or reserves and to plan accordingly. We really encourage anyone who has a passion for geoheritage or the local landscapes to contact us so we can all work together to ensure the best care for these significant spaces. It's important to note that mining is not necessarily incompatible with geoheritage. A number of the sites on the State Geoheritage Register were either formed by mining processes or have had their features enhanced by excavation. A good example is the Armidale Shell Quarry, which is located in suburban Armidale. This quarry is on the State Heritage List, as it was a former brickworks, making bricks for a number of historic buildings in Perth. In addition, the quarry exposed a section of geology not seen anywhere at the surface, so this excavation gave geologists a more complete understanding of the geology of the region. The site was used extensively for geological education by universities in the 20th century, so it has multiple levels of significance. However, the influence of mining on existing geoheritage sites has to be carefully managed, as mining activities can be directly or indirectly detrimental to heritage features of all types. This is why GSWA has input into mining proposals that are within the vicinity of, or may have impact on, geoheritage sites and reserves. We can ask to have specific conditions placed on tenements to reduce or mitigate potential damage. We have similar types of input into other changes in land use affecting Crown land, liaising with other state government departments to ensure that these sites are protected on behalf of the public. Eco and geotourism is presently a big growth area within Australia and globally, and this expansion is beginning to put new types of pressure on geological heritage. It's obvious why heritage sites, whether a gorge, historic building or unusual ecosystem, make such great tourist spots. Their stories provide interest and engagement to visitors beyond pure aesthetics. And although there is certainly an adage that heritage valued and used is heritage appreciated and protected, not every site should be considered for tourism. For those that can support some level of visitation, it's important that a suitable balance is found to allow people to experience a site's story while maintaining the aspects of what makes a location significant. Visitor management is a key part of this. Some of these sites are remote or rugged and wayfaring is an issue. For some, there are underlying cultural sensitivities. Some are vulnerable to damage by vehicle or foot traffic. And for fossil and mineral sites, like the Jack Hills locality seen here, rock souveniring can lead to irreversible site damage and destruction over time. As a result, it's important that when designing tourist experiences, whether tours, walks or self-drive routes, sites are appraised for their individual vulnerabilities and suitable access control and damage mitigation is added to the plan. Due to the recent boom in interest in geotourism, GSWA will be putting extra effort into supporting and guiding tourism projects in the near future, which will include providing recommendations regarding geoheritage and site vulnerabilities. Finally, for those of you who like to collect rocks, minerals and fossils, we ask that you familiarise yourself with the state's geoheritage reserves and sites, and refrain from collecting or purchasing materials taken from any of our sites of geological significance. Careful collecting and ethical purchasing are one of the most critical ways that you can help us protect the integrity of these localities. Many of the sites on the list are unique, or of relatively small outcrop size, and every little piece of rock, mineral or fossil you take away is a piece of state history that won't be available for others to enjoy in the future. These sites are a non-renewable resource for all West Australians, so make it your mantra to take pictures, not rocks. It's also worth remembering that under the Federal Protection of Movable Cultural Heritage Act, it is illegal to export any fossil and some rocks and minerals from Australia without first gaining an export waiver or permit. Please get in contact with us if you would like more information. If you want to know more about the topics I've been talking about today, we have a number of sources of information you can access. First of all, the DMERS website has a page specifically dedicated to geoheritage, which also provides links to a variety of resources. We also have a dedicated email address that you can use to contact us if you have specific questions about geoheritage or geoheritage sites. Spatial information on geoheritage sites and reserves can be accessed via GeoView.WA, GSWA's online mapping platform. In the left-hand menu, go to Special Category Lands and select Geoheritage Sites to see the location of all the currently registered sites within the state. Using the Identify tool to select a site will also bring up some basic information on that locality. We also have a number of publications relating to geoheritage. The most recent is a pamphlet written for tourists and the general public explaining the basics of geoheritage and what we can all do to help protect these important sites. We are also in the process of developing new information for local government, landowners and scientists living or working in the vicinity of geoheritage sites. So thanks for joining us today. Western Australia is a geologically rich and diverse region, and we have a lot of geoheritage to be proud of. We have a number of processes in place to protect these rock stars well into the future, but the key ingredient is you, the Western Australian community. Your interest, knowledge and care is the best protection these localities can have. So get informed, inform others, do the right thing and encourage others to do the same, and we can all better appreciate and enjoy the state's fabulous and fascinating natural beauty. We would love for you to join us.